It is the technology show where we translate geek into regular speak. And with me this week, I have a guest co-host, Daniel Lewkovitz. Or Dan?
That's right, but because the opening credits, I identify as Angela Vithoulkas this
Angela.
week.
Oh, I can't take that off, mate. This is still her show. She's out there running to change the world. Hence the reason we have guest co-hosts and guests. I think if I change the name, I'd probably get a really snotty email or SMS going, oh, really?
Brett, it's a pleasure to be here, and Angela's got some big shoes to fill, so hopefully I can.
Well, thanks for making the time. I'm going to change things up a bit. So I know you're a huge fan of the show and you watch it every week and you sit there with bated breath waiting for it to come. So given what you do, and we'll talk about that a bit later on, because I'd really like to give you a full introduction and you know what it is that you do. I'm going to get rid of the Q&A session that I'm normally asked, and I'm actually got quite a few questions to ask you. So we're going to keep that for the end of the show, so the format still runs. But speaking of format, I would hate to break away from the norm. So let's go into Thingz with a Z. So this week, I'm going to be looking at an app. And I've got to use the word app carefully because it's actually only for Mac. In fact, Dan, I'll ask you, do you use Windows or Mac?
I'm actually pretty agnostic about these things. The monitoring center you see behind us has a combination of Macs, which I do like. I'm on a Mac now, Windows, Unix, and a few variants of Linux as well. So, you know, whatever gets the job done. And sometimes it's just your phone these days.
Well, there's the next question. What phone do you use?
Now, that's a terrible question because I have to ask which phone.
Okay, no, I'm in the same boat, mate. Your primary phone, in other words, the one that you treasure and use, whether that's for your customers or not, what do you use?
Well, I actually make a point of going through the pain of switching every now and then. So I'll spend a bit of time on Android, maybe a Samsung, then I'll spend a bit of time on iOS. And you do go through a bit of pain changing when you do that. But I think it's important as part of staying across technology that you actually stay agnostic and you look across, you know, all of these things. The same way as, you know, you go from driving a sports car and then maybe you trade that in for a ute or a four-wheel drive and go back again. So, you know, that doesn't really answer the question. I mean, at the moment, I'm probably steering toward Android just because I'm playing with some of the, you know, the folding phones, and I like, you know, something that can, you know, mainly just because I've got a big hand and, you know, this thing tends to fit in it. But, you know, if they make a folding iPhone, I might try that. Although, as someone did point out to me, technically every phone can fold if you try hard enough. It just might void the warranty.
Do you remember that? I think it was the iPhone 6 or 7. They were trying to do that bending. I think it was even called Bendgate. Well, we're not going to judge you. I agree with you 100% about, you know, being agnostic, and it is a tech show, and I do play with everything. I do fall back into Apple though as my primary. As you probably have heard on the show, and definitely listeners know, I'm a huge fanboy. I've drunk the Kool-Aid. So what was interesting about buddymove app, which is why I'm featured as my app of the week. So just some of the criteria. Generally, the app needs to do something that's really cool, or needs to have a good UI, UX, or just be out the box. Last week, we talked about the Lego AR app that identified pieces that would then just look at the collection you had and show you what you could build. So that was pretty cool. So buddymove app is probably now more important than ever, given that we work from home and we sit in our desk. Now, I have an incredibly comfortable gaming chair, which I'm more than happy to sit in. I do get distracted and want to start gaming more often than I should. But what buddymove app does, and you can see on the screen, is every now and then it actually, in fact, I think I've got I've actually put that slide in there as well. It actually pops up like that over your screen. So you can see in the background, there's my screen. I think that's my Gmail or something like that in the background. The window pops up and it says, right, time for a break. And it gives you exercises to do. Now, you could do something like picking up your water bottle and rolling it along your arm, and it explains why you do that for carpal tunnel syndrome. Or if I go back to the presentation, stand against the wall, there's actually an animation where you have to stand like a press up and then lean up against and stand and lean up. It's just about moving. Now, if I don't get told to move or someone doesn't tap me on the shoulder, I'll sit here for 12 hours. I just will not move. Now, there's always something. I've got 3 screens. looking at your background, I'd love to come around when we're allowed to, when it's COVID safe, and see your studio, because it looks like you've got a lot more tech running around there than I do. But this was just such a great find. I was actually looking for things like how to train at home, or home training for lazy people, or do I really need to train.com and those type of things. So I came across buddymove. It is only for Mac. I don't know if there's a Windows version coming out. And it's not an iPhone app, so it's not on your phone or your iPad, but it literally shuts down your screen. It just takes over. You have to either close or do it. Now you can, as you can see, say cancel break, or go to the next exercise if you don't want to do this for the prescribed.
Or you get some exercise when you're working on something really important, and then your screen goes black because of that. So you pick up your 12-kilo monitor and hurl it across the room.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, do you suffer from this? Do you sit and get yourself so entrenched in what you're working on that, you just, oh, wow, look at the time and it's 3 o'clock already?
The answer is yes. I do hyper-focus. Now, I've got some measures around that. Now, interestingly, I wear a smart watch from time to time, and smart watches are pretty good at keeping you active. They'll tell you you've been sedentary for an hour, it's time to get up and move around. However, and this is why this app could be useful, I tend to take my wristwatch off when I'm sitting at a computer, because it makes noise and it scratches my laptop and so forth. So, your watch just sits there quietly vibrating away, telling you that you've been sitting there. And of course, 4 hours later, you pick it up and realize. So another technique that I have found works is to have, I don't have it with me, but about a 3-litre bottle of water that's about yay big sitting next to me. And I drink it. And you go through one of those and you'll find yourself, you actually do need to get up every now and then, because you've got to go to the bathroom. And it's not much of a workout, but it does get you off your bum.
I see someone says that they'll welcome you back to the light side of the force anytime you'd like to come back. And yes, you will. But it sounds like you still have an iPhone. So I have that, right? I've got that on my Apple Watch, and it says time to stand up. It's so easy to ignore. I can just look at it and go, I don't even have to touch the screen. I just go, okay, that's nice, time to stand up. I don't, but as I said, I have 3 screens. I'm looking, you'll see I'm always looking when I'm on the show as well. I've got notes there, I've got camera here, I've got presentation there, and all other weird and wonderfuls. It takes over all 3 screens. That's it. You cannot.
I did try a standing desk, and I thought that might help. But the problem is, people would come into my office and place things on my desk, and so it would sort of get to the stage where if I went from a seated to a standing position, it would sort of yeet everything right across the room, and there'd be paperwork everywhere. So my standing desk has turned into a very much seated with a lot less leg room.
Yeah, I've tried that as well. I didn't go so far as actually putting in one of those desks that rise and fall. But I have, with my external monitor, I can tilt it so that I can actually literally stand and look down on my monitor. It's not the same, unless you've got a reason. And again, you've got to be conscious of it. So what I find happens by using buddymove is that if I do get up and go and lean against the wall like this particular exercise shows, and some of them let you still sit, you just move to the front of your chair and you stretch and you do arm raises. It's all kinds of things. If I am standing though, 1, I'll go and get a glass of water or at least move, and 2, I'll come back and then choose to stand. So it's a great app even if you're not disciplined. It's still a great app, just for the sense that it actually makes you aware of what you're not doing. They've actually given me a code. So I think the first person that I see that pops up in the comments, and obviously you need to be a Mac user, otherwise it's a waste of time, but it's a free app. But the first person that just pops up and says, me please, or something like that, I'm going to send a code over to you. And you can then try the pro version, because there's a free version to try, which is limited. I've got the pro version. I don't think it was expensive, but yeah, happy to give one away. So yeah, I'll keep a lookout for that, or just hit me on Twitter or any of the other channels. So that was my app. Oh, there we go. I download the Waterminder app. Okay, so someone's got the Waterminder app as well. That was my Thingz with a Z, and I'm going to now move into, in fact, there it was. There's the trapezium muscle massage. It tells you what to do, how to sit, what it's going to affect. Anyway, so business, me please. Okay, I've given away the code. There we go. Me please, LinkedIn user. Oh, I'll be able to get that data offline. Okay, cool. So there we go. Code's gone.
Yeah,
Well
I really need to see a photo of that LinkedIn user.
LinkedIn user, please send us a photo. Dan wants to verify you.
And that's the before picture, and then after a bit of seated exercise, we'll see how you look in a few months.
Well, I'm definitely going to show you my before and after because I'm still suffering with COVID. This is more about not necessarily getting a six-pack unless it's beer, but it's definitely about moving.
Well, you can just work on the keg.
I'm working on the keg. Right. Business tech news. Afterpay, ZipPay, Klarna, and I think now PayPal has just come into the fray as well. Now, buy now, pay later is not new. It's been around for a while. So, why am I putting this up? Well, I did mention I was a bit of a fanboy, and we've just talked about an Apple app. Apple's made a very, very interesting announcement. They're looking at playing into the buy now, pay later space. So last week's show, I spoke about the fact that they've now come up with the Apple card, gift card. So you can use it on anything Apple, not having to buy an iTunes card for iTunes and app for app. But, well, you said you were using an Android and you showed us your super slick Samsung Fold 2, I hope, not 1, because that was a problem. So you would obviously use Android Pay or Samsung Pay. But it's the same thing, right? You have your credit cards in your phone, you tap them, it's easy to go. Now you have an ability where Apple, you already have an iPhone, you've already got an Apple Wallet rocking, and if you decide that you just don't have enough money, you put into Apple Pay. I don't know, Dan, what do you think?
Well, I think there are every day more and more tools that allow people to get into irrecoverable debt. So what a time to be alive. One of the things that fascinates me in looking at payment methods is, in the last year, we've had this sort of explosion in buy now, pay later. And it's getting to the point where, once upon a time, you used to see, American Express, MasterCard, EFTPOS logo, and maybe PayPal next to a shopping cart or a checkout. And now you practically have to scroll through the screen of all the various payment options. And I suppose the concern for me is that whilst that would be a case of perhaps, the customer is always right and giving the customer whatever they want, it also allows people to probably, max out one and then max out another. And, this is potentially very easy credit. Now, when Apple comes into this, you've now got a 300-pound gorilla that's entered the room, and they're not lightweights, but, they will also be subject to very, very heavy regulation. And if nothing else, it's because of their existing relationships with banks and the environments in which they operate. But I think this is one area where the developing world is light years ahead of us. So if you travel to China and you look at the way, for example, WeChat Pay is used there, it is so prolific. It is a complete alternative to cash. And what we're seeing now is all of these other fragmented technologies arriving. I was in China a few years ago and discovered just how ubiquitous this was. If you were just buying things from someone on the side of the street, buskers, even beggars would have a QR code, and you could give money to a beggar. And I found myself at a public toilet in regional China. And when I went in there, and it's a squat pit, it's not a Western style toilet, so it's already enough of a challenge, but there was no toilet paper. And using my rudimentary sign language, I asked someone, and they pointed to this very fancy vending machine that was just inside the front. And it just had an LCD screen on it and everything. And I'm looking at it and there's no buttons to press. And I'm sort of wondering what happens. And then someone else gestures to me, oh, you show this, your WeChat, and it gives you toilet paper. And then I stood there and I watched a few other people would come in. They'd scan their QR code and it would spit out a little packet of tissues after making them watch an ad for 10 seconds. And I thought, that's fantastic. But as a foreign national, I actually was not allowed to get WeChat when I was within mainland China. I just couldn't register unless I could, prove who I was, which was difficult for me to do. So when I was saying to people, can you do this for me? They looked at me like I was a crazy person. It is so prolific there. And the thing that worries me is that we now have potentially such an explosion in these services. And of course, some of them did incredibly well. I mean, the guys from ZipPay, just I'm so happy for them how well they did. But I worry that this is going to become, the browser wars or VHS versus Betamax, and then you're going to have to register for a dozen of these services on the off chance that one of them is accepted, or just stay right out of it. So there is hope that Apple might sort of, if they don't at least aggregate a bunch of these, provide one option that everyone's going to want to put their hand up and accept. However, is that going to run on non-Apple phones? Because there are a few of us out there.
Yeah, so I think this is kind of exactly what you were saying now is exactly what PayPal's trying to do as well, where they're saying it doesn't matter what card you have in your wallet, we'll just use PayPal and aggregate it for you, and they'll cop it, and obviously they're looking to clip the late payments. That's how these guys make their money. So Apple won't be available off Apple, and that's part of the security side. They might do a couple of deals, like with Square, for example, with Jack Dorsey and Square. They were a very instrumental part in it, in that they used an iPad, and it worked well with an iPhone before anything else. So you might see a couple of preferred partners. But I think you hit the nail on the head, is that Apple's a responsible company in the sense that they're not going to just let you get into debt like anyone else would, and try and clip the tickets on the late fees, which is where these companies do make their money. But it's just, you said it earlier on, it's like we've got so many ways now we can get ourselves into more trouble. This is the problem, right? Is that, if you're working on a budget and you just don't have enough money, that you've got Apple Buy Now, Pay Later, whatever it's going to be called, and you can just charge it. And of course, that's where that vicious cycle starts.
Well, you raise another interesting point when you mentioned Jack Dorsey, which is that once Silicon Valley and big tech now control payment methods, what's going to happen to people who, for whatever reason, just find themselves deplatformed? I mean, I've done work with bank security departments over the years, and I've worked with a number of the major banks, and I understand the risk and how they deal with it. And one of the things that they're very aware of when they're dealing with emotionally disturbed people, or people with serious mental illness, or people with a propensity to violence, is that banking is, I wouldn't say a human right, but it's such a fundamental requirement for functioning in society. So when banks have had enough of a customer and they give that customer the move on, that customer will appear at another bank. So, the Commonwealth Bank might say goodbye to a violent, abusive customer, and that customer then turns up at Westpac and moves to ANZ and so forth. So you have all the sort of banks swapping their problem customers with each other, but those people can still find a bank that's prepared to deal with them. Now, we've looked at the very, very arbitrary, in many cases, completely irresponsible way companies like Facebook, Twitter, kick people off. I mean, I got banned from LinkedIn for a few weeks due to someone, who decided to stalk me and complain about a bunch of my posts. And it actually took me several weeks to get that back. Now, I don't rely on LinkedIn to make money, but if you rely on these tools to actually pay your bills, and a platform like this could just sort of arbitrarily kick you out, I think that's a real problem. So I hope that some of the regulation around this goes beyond just the financial and the tax and so forth impacts of it. And that was the sound of a Galaxy Fold hitting the deck. And we actually make sure that these things become part of living in a town square. And as they become more and more essential, there are protections in there for consumers to make sure that they maintain access to that in a responsible manner. Now, meanwhile, off to the side of all this, you've got crypto out there as well. So it's going to become an interesting time to play for stuff.
Someone just posted a comment about that as well, saying that PayPal's not banned them. I don't know if you saw that other thing that popped up that also said, PayPal won't let you use it anymore, that responsible discussion. And crypto is an attempt to decentralize. And look, PayPal's banned people from its service too. So it's very interesting.
You're nobody until you've been banned from Twitter.
Well, Donald Trump's now the king of everything. I mean, he's been banned from everything. I want to move past this segment, but I think that, especially in Australia, where we're such a tap to pay society, exactly what you're saying now, you can't afford to not have the ability to tap to pay. No one's taking cash. I've walked past, because of COVID, right? I've walked past shops that say no cash. And, rewind 3 or 4 years ago, if I walked into a 7-Eleven and wanted to pay $1 for my coffee with a card, they probably would have kicked me out. Now, if I walk into a 7-Eleven and want to pay $1 with my coffee with $1, they're probably going to kick me out. So, you have to have some form of payment. And that's where these type of services that can live on your phone without you having to do anything. Hence PayPal's play as well, because it's just part of their system. It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But it's still early days. Apple does kind of take their time before they launch. They tease and then they launch. This is a segment I've been wanting to talk about for a while. So that's the Amazon Fire Stick. Do you have Amazon Prime, by the way, Dan? Or
I do have Prime.
Okay. So most people, especially with COVID, have got more than 3 services, apparently. This is the stats. So, like Netflix, Stan, and Prime, or Netflix, Disney, and I don't know, KO. There's so many of them. What's very interesting is, I think it was like 4 years ago, Amazon was way down, like 3rd. Now, in 3 years, they're actually number 1 when it comes to market share. I think they tied with Roku at 36%. Now, for those people, you just said you have Prime. I probably should have carried on and said, do you take advantage of all the things that come with Prime, or do you only have Prime because of the shipping?
Oh, look, I mean, when you look at all of these streaming shows, it's like the old line from The Simpsons, 99 channels, nothing but cats. There's so much out there, and no one has time to watch it. I've probably not done the sort of COVID lockdown thing of just jumping online and, buying stuff I don't need at prices I can't resist, So I've sort of held off that. It does sadden me that some of these companies are now making so much money while other people are, basically losing everything, because, you and I, we're blessed, we're middle-class people that can work from home. And there are so many people out there who just simply can't. But the fact is, I don't have time to watch half of these programs. Yeah. The number of people that have said, you've got to watch this, it's like, oh, I'll add it to the list. I'm still playing catch up on The Sopranos, and that's only, about 12 years since it went off air?
20. Look, I can't go to sleep without watching something. It's the weirdest thing. If I don't, I want to watch it, but it actually puts me to sleep. And what I've realized is it just actually stops my brain and lets me, to kind of wind down. Someone just said, I'll have it for shipping and Prime. I must say, I'm actually quite enjoying the documentary side of Prime. There's some really good content out there. And when you look at it from a price point of view, it's understandable why it's now so highly ranked. I think you can pay $60 for the year or $6 a month, whichever one you prefer. You get free shipping, free international shipping on most stuff if you do it. And, we're going to talk about what you do in your day-to-day life when you're not spending time talking to me. A lot of things come from overseas. You can now get them shipped for free, ebooks for free, content for free. I'm a big gamer, so is my son. Twitch, which is part of Amazon, and every month we get given something from Twitch for free or in-game credits. So it's an incredible deal. But it just shows you, though, like, how people say you need to Xerox something when they're talking about photocopying, but no one has Xerox anymore. In fact, I don't know if Xerox is even around. Netflix was always the, terminology for watching something as a cable cutter. They've obviously been resting on their laurels that now that Amazon is sitting at number 1, I think Netflix is number 2 now. And, with Disney Plus, with Paramount, all of these services coming online and taking their content back from Netflix. It's going to be a very interesting space to watch and see how this all unfolds. I think I'm staying with Amazon. Yeah. So this slide, I've really got value for money from my design team when it comes to this slide, because this is the 3rd week in a row that I've used this slide. The first week I used it 3 weeks ago. Richard was about to go, and obviously Jeff was a little bit, behind. And then last week I used it because Richard did go and Jeff was still talking about it. So this week, my rocketometer, as I like to call it, has changed again. I've got nut cats running around in the background. So I've made last week's one, the little blue rocket was little and hanging down, but got to give him kudos for last night's performance, or yesterday morning, whatever it was in their time zone. So I've made his rocket a little bit bigger for him. And he does get some cred back. Oldest astronaut, youngest astronaut, took his brother with him. Nice guy. I don't know if you watched the launch. It was really over really quickly. I mean, I think it was like 13 minutes or 14 minutes.
Well, I think that's why Mackenzie left him as well.
You mean, so I've basically got to go in and re-edit my rocket, but I did make it blue because he's obviously needed some help from the blue department. Oh wait, it's called Origin Blue. That's why I made it blue. It wasn't any other references. So I'm pretty sure now that the slide will finally leave my technology show deck until Elon decides to go and take his little trip, and then we have to find a way. I'm just reading a comment that's come through. I can put it up here. Something about gin. They started gin, Origin company. Oh no, I'm going to take it off again. So yeah, third time I've used that slide on the Rockometer. Branson still has it. He was first. I think his was cooler as well, but we'll see how this all plays out. It's interesting though that we're all going to be leaving for space sometime soon. I don't think there's much else that I have on the news side. Oh, got to do my weekly punt. Dan, do you know about the SME Mall? Have I told you about the SME Mall?
Tell everybody.
Tell everyone about the SME Mall. So TCL sponsors our shows, you know, and it broadcasts through the SME Association. So we built a mall. Any small business out there that now needs and or wants to sell online services and products, free shop on the SME Mall. There's the URL. So in fact, I was looking last night. There's now over 150 vendors and or affiliate deals and links. So there's definitely stuff there. Got some really cool products there. In fact, as I'm looking at my screen, I use my third monitor is an espresso screen. You can find that in the mall. So that's the smemall.org. I have one last piece of information, and I think this is my segue into what you do because we're finally getting there. So I think it was last week or week before, the Department of Education got hacked just before homeschooling was about to start. I got a couple of questions on this. First of all, why? Like, what are you going to take from the Department of Education? Like, there's no money there. And I'm sure you can answer those questions. That was just like going through my mind. Like, is it just kids saying, oh, well, we did it because we could?
Well, I think, as someone who sells security systems and alarm systems, many, many, many years after I left school, I can now make a confession, which is that the first alarm system I ever defeated was at my public high school. And that's, that's what sort of introduced me to hacking security systems and how to defeat them and how easy it was. But education security always had a problem because, or a unique challenge, I suppose, because most organizations invest all of their energy or most of their energy in stopping an outsider threat, in sort of stopping, the hordes at the gate. Whereas the insider threat in education is probably bigger. I mean, if you take, a typical school these days, every student inside that school is trying to get past the firewall, is trying to get past all the restrictions in the way that in perhaps a corporate environment, people wouldn't do it. So, it's almost like their firewalls have to be turned around because, yes, as you said, why would someone want access to, universities, I get it, there's valuable intellectual property there, but a high school, aside from some demographic data, what's the value of that? Now, obviously, there are sensitive things there that I can't talk about, but taking your point, they've almost got the security requirement around the wrong way. And one thing you also need to remember is that trying to take out Department of Education systems the week before school goes back and especially with like online or remote learning and online NAPLAN testing, exams, assessments, and so forth, is really just a modern version of what used to happen, which was people would phone up the school with a bomb threat right when an exam was sitting in the hope that the school would be evacuated and the and the exam wouldn't go ahead. So, if you could take their systems down, well, hey, your school holidays just got a bit longer, but of course our nation got dumber as a result. So, yay, education.
Well, that brings us to the formal introduction of our guest or rather co-host of the week. You've been talking for the last 20, 30 minutes with us. So Daniel, welcome to the show, CEO of Calamity. And as I said at the beginning of the show, I wanted to save it to the end, which, I always do things a bit weird and wonderful, and I'm also waiting for Andrew to send me a ping. But basically, normally at this time of the show, we've done everything. We go through the all the bits and pieces in the news, and then we have Q&A. Now, I have lots of questions. So instead of taking some of the questions I've received from listeners over the week, like we always do, and then just put them at the end of the segment, I'm going to actually ask you a couple of questions, and hopefully you can explain it. So I think while I get those all queued up, or the ones that I've got here, give us a quick overview of what Calamity is, what you do. I mean, you've kind of alluded to it slightly at the education punt, but go for it. Tell us what calamity.com.au is all about.
Of course. Well, you can't see it on this small camera, but I'm a very big guy, and I fell into security while I was working my way through education many years ago. And I've gone on to sort of combine technology and IT and, hacking once upon a time with more traditional physical security to come up with really an electronic and an all-round security product and service that works. And so Calamity, and you can actually see our monitoring center behind me. We have people sitting there 24/7 looking after alarm systems, monitoring remote camera systems, life safety systems. So we look after everything from people who are in high-risk situations to people's elderly parents who might be at risk of falling down in the home. We install cameras, alarm systems, electronic access control systems. And although there's, a lot of sort of man with van installers who do that kind of thing, we actually underpin it by a very, very sophisticated monitoring facility behind me. And so what's actually really cool is that, there's a lot of people who work in tech and, they operate in offices with video walls and things like that. But the people behind me actually get to save lives. They're heroes in a headset. And that's really awesome. So basically, we are a security and a life safety technology provider, and we keep people safe and we help them be fearless.
Well, I went onto your LinkedIn profile, not stalking. I mean, we're talking, so we're allowed to. And I saw you had a thing there. I fight nightmares. I don't know if I'm allowed to say, does that include my mother-in-law? Because that might put me in. But I'm assuming
we don't make jokes about mother-in-laws, because if we name them, we might summon them.
So I mean, security has obviously become a really big thing. And in fact, I did find my question. So the question that I kind of would want to ask of you, and hopefully we can quickly go through those as well on your side, is first of all, what is two-factor authentication, and why should I set it up? Because what a lot of people might have noticed at the moment, and I'm seeing it now with all of my HubSpot, Xero, even my iPhone, asking me to set up this 2FA or two-factor authentication. So do you want to just take us through what it is and why we should set it up?
Sure. Well, two-factor authentication is really a partial solution to the problem of passwords being stolen, borrowed, leaked, or compromised. The problem with a password is that if someone managed to gain access to your password, they now have access to your digital life. And you'd often see things like passwords stuck to monitors or easily guessed passwords. One of my favorite tricks when you meet people is you say, where did you grow up, and where did you go to school, and do you have pets, and what was your pet's first name, and when were your parents married, and do I know your mum, or what was her maiden name? And you know what, very quickly you've got a mother's maiden name, the street they grew up in, the name of their first pet, and that's actually often enough to do a password reset on a person and compromise their password. Yep. The other thing, it makes for terrible small talk, mind you, but the other thing that people can do is they can use keystroke loggers, which actually captures everything you record on your computer, or even just look over the screen and steal a password. So once someone has that password, they now have the keys to your kingdom. So two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, where you have more than one thing to get in, is actually how you mitigate that. So you have a number of factors, which can be something for example, a password. That can be a secret that you know. It can be something that you have. For example, it could be a USB key, or it could be a number that's generated on a physical device like your mobile phone, so something you have, or it could be something you are. So if we bring biometrics into the mix, so something you are, your facial biometrics, your retina, your handprint, fingerprint, your voice recognition, something about your physical presence that allows it to identify. So a system that uses multi-factor authentication is going to ask for two things. First, it's going to ask the password. And if someone doesn't have a password, well, that's it. It's game over. But if they have the password, it wants to make sure that that's the actual person who should have it. So it might be something like asking you to read the number that was sent to your phone. Some of the weaker systems, but they're a good Band-Aid fix. They might push an SMS to your phone and ask you to read that number back. And so it just means that even if your password gets given away, it's not game over for you. There's still an additional layer of protection there that needs to be compromised.
Awesome. Well, I've actually been, on all the new software I've been signing up for, and that I've actually just been letting Google choose my password. They come up with those incredibly long hex algorithms that no one remembers, and it says it will remember it for me, or my iPhone will remember it for me. I'm not sure that it's the best way to go, but it's probably better than, as you said, my birthday and pet's name with a hash, or I mean, you can see a new IT professional that's the H is a hashtag and the 1 is a exclamation.
Yeah, well, see, using late speak doesn't work because password cracking tools know that hello can be spelled HELLO or H3770. So they guess that very quickly. But I think all this stuff is also helpful because once upon a time you really had one password. It was the password to your computer or the password to your email. Now, you have passwords to everything. I mean, even to watch TV, you need a password. And if you use the same password on all of those things, people think it's a pain when their credit card gets stolen and they've got to ring half a dozen companies and change the details. Try doing that for dozens or hundreds potentially of online services. So, but of course, once you start having multiple passwords for multiple services, that becomes unwieldy as well. So a lot of people now are looking at, password keeping tools like, for example, LastPass, which is a really useful tool. And there's another pain point as well, which is that if you use something like, for example, Google Authenticator or Microsoft have one as well, or SMS to your phone, if you lose or break that phone, you can actually find yourself now locked out of a lot of things, and it's really, really difficult. So one tool that I think is really cool, it's called Authy, AUTHY. And Authy is really nice because it allows you to sort of back up your second factor and move that to another device. And, even if you don't trust Authy, and I mean, I don't, they still don't have the first factor, which means that even if that company sort of suddenly went evil, they're not necessarily going to get into things. But it does mean as you move phones every year or so, as we mentioned, people actually do. Yes, it is a good tool for authenticating. As you move from phone to phone, it just takes away the pain of having to uninstall and reinstall and copy things off. Which I've got to tell you, when you're in some third world country and you don't have access to things, and all of a sudden you find yourself locked out because your phone's floating down the river somewhere. That's a good control. So the same way as if you have a safe at home and you have valuables in the safe, the code for that safe needs to be with a solicitor or somewhere secure, such that if you get hit by a bus, you don't take that secret to the grave with you. And what's now happening is we're putting lots of secrets on our phone, and those secrets can sort of go to the phone's grave as well. So before you sort of turn on every security function, and before you decide, oh yes, I'm going to encrypt my hard drive, oh yes, I'm going to put a password on things, I always encourage people to just stop and just think about what happens when things go wrong, which is by no means a reason not to do it. It just means being smart about how you do it and always have a backup and a plan B.
Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask as well, is how do your physical security and your cyber or IT security coexist? Because you're using some examples now, for example, you lose your phone. But I'm talking about physical security in the sense of your actual physical well-being and protecting your asset, be it your home or be it your business. And then, of course, the infiltration or potential infiltration from the cyber side of things.
Right. So what you just referred to about protecting assets is what it all comes down to. Now, everybody has assets, and those assets could be people. Those assets could be buildings. The asset that most people think about, cash and valuables. But assets can also be information. It can be reputation. It can be intellectual property. And so you've got to look at all of these things. Now, I use banks as a good example of this because let's say a person took a sawn-off shotgun and they went into a bank branch and they held up the bank. These days with fly-up screens or barriers or cash recycling machines under the counter or drop safes or whatever it happens to be, they might get, $5, $10, $15,000 worth of cash. And there's a good risk of them getting arrested or getting shot. Now, if a person were to come over the wire via a network and they were to attack that bank, they could potentially get away with millions. And whereas the guy who stole $5,000, everyone knows there was a holdup. Millions could be stolen right out from under an organisation's nose and they wouldn't even know about it. So if you obsess over physical security but you ignore your information security or your IT security or even your cyber security, as they now tend to call it, you don't actually have overall protection of your assets. But it works in the other way as well, because you have all sorts of companies that now, they'll talk all about their encryption and how secure your data is and so forth. But these systems are in a server room somewhere that wouldn't stand up to a well-aimed kick. So a person can, physically steal those assets or trash them or something like that. So you've really got to look at sort of your overall risk management and protecting, protecting everything. So, or bringing it back to, a more personal environment. If you look at your elderly parents, well, what are the risks that they face? Everyone has unique risks. So are they at risk of falling over in the home? You might get a system like ours that helps you with fall detection, but, are your elderly parents also at risk of being scammed because people ring them up and say, hey, we've cut off your pay TV, and they panic and, hand over their password, and next they're subject to identity theft. So these are all the risks that you have to go through. And it doesn't matter whether you're a corner butcher or you're a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Every organization and every individual has a unique risk profile. And what you need to do is you need to manage that risk to get it to an acceptable level that allows you to go to sleep at night and sleep well.
I'm going to ask one last question because I see we're going to run out of time. In your opinion, or maybe you've got stats, what's our biggest threat at the moment? I'm talking about here in Australia. Obviously every country has its own issues. I mean, my ex-country has lots of issues at the moment. But what is our biggest threat, whether it's to business or to personal? What are you seeing at the moment, or what are you focusing on at the moment?
Well, one of the things I find with recent South African migrants is that they come from a country where you'd sleep behind grills and bars and you'd have an armed protective detail positioned on your street, and you'd sleep with a gun in the bedside table.
Yeah.
And they come to Australia and they think they've entered nirvana. And, I say to them, let me put an alarm system in your house. And they go, oh, no, we're in Australia. And they go to bed with the doors wide open. And the look on their face one day when they get robbed blind, and they feel so stupid. So, look, people's biggest risk, because it varies, everyone's got a different situation, but really is just ignorance. It's doing nothing, because the one thing I hate is when people ring me on a Monday and they say, our company got robbed on Friday, or my home got broken into, or we've suffered loss. And, if they had something in place beforehand, that would not have happened. Every year around Christmas time, a week before Christmas, we get calls from people saying, oh, I'm going overseas, I need security. It's like the crooks go away over Christmas as well. Why didn't you have security in May? Do you think robbers only work 1 month of the year? So, the biggest mistake people make is just not thinking about it. Now, look, you don't need to lose sleep over this stuff. You don't need to be terrified, be alert, not alarmed, all that sort of stuff. But just don't ignore these things, because not only do you suffer tangible loss when things go wrong, you feel really stupid because you felt like you should have done something about it earlier. So just do it earlier. Call a company like mine, take a look at your position, protect your assets, look after your family, talk about these things with other people, and don't learn hard lessons.
Good advice. So I've just put the website up on the screen there as well, calamity.com.au. Dan, I hope that it's the first time having you on the show, and I love security. I talk about it all the time. I talk about cybercrime and scams and all the other wonderful things. So hopefully we're going to be able to get you back on the show. I might even
Brett, that'd be great. Look, thanks for putting the website up there. And look, just as a special perk to your viewers, look, if anybody gets in touch with us, just mention this podcast or SME TV, TCL, and I'll give you a few months on me, and that'll be my lockdown present for everyone.
Appreciate that. Thanks, mate. That's really good of you. So, look, it's going to bring us to the end of the show. Unfortunately, it does come around very quickly. Well, actually, no, it comes around the same amount of time every week. Time's kind of constant. But Thanks again. Thanks, and thanks for the offer. I'll put that up in the post show notes as well. And I look forward to our next catch up. So until next time, keep your screens clean and your knobs shiny.